That Tuesday felt like any other night. Marcus had left for his overnight shift at the plant around 10, and I locked the deadbolt behind him the way I always did. Our house sat on a half-acre lot at the edge of a cul-de-sac in a suburb about 40 minutes outside Columbus. We'd lived there 3 years and never had a single problem with the neighborhood. I made tea and settled onto the couch with a book I'd been trying to finish for weeks. Around 11:30, I heard something at the back of the house. It was subtle at first, more of a pressure against the door than a knock. I set the book down and listened. It was like someone was slowly testing the handle of the back door that connected to the garage. I told myself it was the wind. We'd had gusts all evening, and the side gate sometimes rattled loose from its latch when the weather picked up. I went back to reading. Maybe 10 minutes later, I heard a different sound entirely. It was lower and more deliberate, coming from the utility room just off the kitchen. I stood up slowly and moved into the hallway. The utility room door was slightly ajar. I always kept it pulled shut. I was certain of that. I pushed it open with my foot and swept the light on. Nothing looked disturbed. The washing machine was mid-cycle. The small window above the dryer was latched. I stood there for a second, breathing, then walked the perimeter of the room. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. I went back to the couch and picked up my phone. Marcus's shift ran until 6 a.m., and he kept his ringer off while he worked the floor. I texted him anyway and set the phone face up on the cushion beside me. Around midnight, the motion light above the garage door tripped on. I could see the orange glow through the curtains from where I was sitting. I got up and looked through the gap in the fabric. The driveway was empty. The light cycled off after 30 seconds. Then it tripped again. Something was moving out there, staying just in the edge of the sensor's range. I could see the outline of a figure standing near the fence line between our yard and the neighbors. They weren't moving toward the house. They were just standing there. My throat tightened. I backed away from the window without taking my eyes off it. I grabbed my phone and called Marcus directly. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. I went to the kitchen and opened the drawer where we kept a small flashlight and a box cutter I used for packages. I held the box cutter in my right hand and pressed my back against the wall beside the window. The motion light had gone dark again. The figure was gone. I couldn't tell if they'd walked away from the house or toward it. My ears were straining so hard I could hear the blood moving in my head. Then the back door handle turned. Not rattled, turned. Someone was trying it deliberately, feeling for the lock. I called 911 right then. I whispered to the operator that someone was trying to get into my house from the back. She kept her voice calm and asked if I was somewhere safe inside. I moved to the bedroom at the far end of the hall and pushed the dresser against the door with one arm, while I held the phone with the other. The operator said a unit was 6 minutes out. I heard the back door rattle hard twice more. Then I heard nothing. The silence was worse. I couldn't tell if they'd left or if they'd found another way in. I stood against the far wall of the bedroom and watched the door handle and waited. The 6 minutes felt like something I couldn't measure. The officers arrived and found the back door unlatched. The deadbolt was intact, but the secondary lock beneath it had been punched out cleanly with something narrow, probably a flathead screwdriver. The door was sitting open about an inch when they got there. They swept the house and found nobody inside. They found boot prints in the mud along the fence line, and again near the utility room window, which had a fresh mark along the lower frame. where someone had tried to work it open from outside. They took photos and filed a report. One of the officers told me whoever it was had been patient about it. He said they usually come back when they think the house is empty. Marcus came home early. Neither of us slept much after that. I moved into the new apartment on a Saturday in early March. It was on the 3rd floor of a 4-story building in a part of the city that was supposed to be up and coming. The rent was $850 a month, which was low for that neighborhood. And the landlord, a guy named Hal, who communicated mostly through texts, explained that the building was still transitioning between tenants. Most of the other units were vacant. I had my furniture in by late afternoon and ordered a pizza that I ate sitting on the floor because my table hadn't arrived yet. The building was quieter than I expected. The hallway outside smelled faintly like mildew and old carpet, but the apartment itself was fine. The first week passed without anything unusual. I was working remotely then, still getting settled into a contract job that I'd started 2 months prior, so I was home most of the day. The building stayed mostly silent. I heard footsteps above me a few times, which meant at least one other tenant was on the 4th floor. Around the 9-day mark, I noticed the door to the stairwell across from my unit had started staying propped open. I'd never seen it open before. There was a small rubber wedge jammed underneath it. I kicked it out and let the door close and didn't think about it again. The next morning, the wedge was back in exactly the same spot. I kicked it out a second time. 2 days later, I came back from the grocery store and found my apartment door unlocked. I was certain I'd locked it before I left. My key required 2 full rotations to engage the deadbolt, and I'd done it twice and tested the handle before I walked away. I stood in the hallway for a moment before I pushed the door open. Everything looked the same at first. My laptop was still on the desk. My jacket was still on the hook by the door, but the window above the fire escape was open about 4 inches. I always kept that window shut and latched. I hadn't opened it since I moved in. I set down the groceries and checked every room in the apartment. The closets, behind the shower curtain, under the bed. Nothing. I called Hal and told him what happened. He said he'd look into it and that maybe maintenance had been through, though he couldn't confirm it. I asked him to send me a list of who had keys to my unit. He said it was just him and me. The next morning, I went down to the building's main entrance and looked at the door panel. Every single buzzer label except mine was blank. Nobody else in the building had their name listed. I went back upstairs and stood in my hallway for a while, just thinking. The stairwell door was propped open again. I stood at the top of the stairs and looked down. There were 2 sleeping bags and a plastic bin of food at the bottom of the stairwell on the ground floor landing. Someone had been living there. I couldn't tell how long. I went back to my apartment and started looking more carefully. The rubber wedge someone kept putting under that stairwell door was not something a person living rough in a stairwell would bother with. The wedge kept the door from latching. It kept them from being locked out of the floor. When I checked my utility closet again more carefully, I found one of my kitchen knives sitting on the shelf beside the water heater. I hadn't put it there. I hadn't used that closet for anything. My hands went cold. I packed a bag that evening, called a friend across town, and left. I never went back alone. When I finally gave notice to Hal through text, his response came back in 4 minutes. It just said, "Okay." That was it.